Good evening, everyone. It's always fascinating to do the last session in any conference because all of you have heard so much and almost everything has been captured, has been spoken about, has been deliberated upon, makes the task much easier for me. I'm supposed to speak on the subject of the next in automotive or automobile branding. Tough ask. And so I start with this. This was done by a friend of mine called Albert Robida. He's a futurist and he did this in 1902. Of course, I was there in 1902 in some other form. So he must have been a friend of mine. In 1902, this was Robida's futuristic vision of what the opera in Paris would be like. So people basically would be flying around. Okay, there are only flying machines. So you see the opera here. People are flying different kinds of machines. That's the Eiffel Tower. You would see different other typical places in Paris. But this is what a futurist typically thought of the world of mobility and the world of transportation 120 years back. This is the opera in the year 2022. So Robida thought of something, life wasted, because we haven't actually kept pace with what he was thinking about. Because this is the opera. You still have everything on the road. You have a trike, you have a car, you have a van, you have people walking. Who's flying? Nobody's flying. Spielberg, when he made the Minority Report, cars were going all over. Cars are not going all over. Cars are still on the road. The day when they would go all over, I don't think we will call them cars. We'll call them flying objects, or flying mobiles, or flying mobiles, or something like that. And that brings me to the subject of the next in automobile branding. What really is the next? Is it tomorrow? Is it the day after tomorrow? Or is it the next year or the next decade? So everything is very contextual when it actually comes to the industry. I happen to have spent a few decades in the industry, and I think it's important that we understand where the industry really stands for me to share my thoughts and my views on where really automobile branding is going. So the industry, what we like to know is automobiles are dynamic, right? And automobiles mean cars. And automobiles are private affairs. I mean, they're individual. We buy an automobile and we consume it. We use it. We think mobility is about products. We think automobile brands are timeless, and automotive branding for the design fraternity largely, and also the marketers, is about logos, shapes, and advertising. What we need to know is the industry is slow. And for strategic reasons, because it's a highly capital-intensive industry, right? One plant, I mean, there are friends of mine from Hyundai who are sitting here, they would know much better than I do. Just setting up one assembly line for an automobile in any part of the world will cost you close to 2,500 crores of rupees. Okay? It's $300 million. If you really want to run a plant of some substance in a market like India, you would need to put in $1 billion of investment. So these are massive investments. This is not like mobile phones or color televisions or washing machines or aerated beverages. Because when you're making an investment, you better ensure that you get the returns for the investment. Therefore, however much we may want the industry to keep making changes and keep making strides and taking strides, the industry by its very nature is slow. Automobiles are not only about cars. Cars are the nice things of hype and hoopla. Automobiles are also about scooters, motorcycles, mopeds, buses, trucks, light commercial vehicles, your Tata Aces, your three-wheelers. So when we talk about automobile branding, it includes all that, not just the nice glitzy part of your swanky SUVs and sedans being talked about and being dealt with. Automobiles are not just about private mobility, they're actually about public mobility. And the more advanced economies and nations in the world, they focus more on public mobility than private. Mobility is not just about products. Mobility is actually more about ownership or the usership. Now, ownership is different from usership. You need not own a piece of mobility to use it. And that's very important for the generations of tomorrow and the day after. And that has implications on, therefore, what automobile branding needs to be. Automobile brands are timeless, but they're wasting assets. The moment you buy your favorite car and roll it out of the showroom and you want to sell it, you will get at least 10% lower price than what you paid for 7 minutes back in the showroom. It's a wasting asset. It's an asset nevertheless because there's something called a resale value, but it is depreciating, right? The brands can be timeless, but the products are wasting. Lastly, automobile branding is not, I would say, only about logos and shapes and styles and advertising. Automobile branding tomorrow and the day after will be all about experiences. It's all about experiences. It's actually when I was having a discussion in the afternoon as to when the designer and the marketer sit together on the same table without any daggers at their backs, okay, sitting together and creating solutions for people like us. That is really what automobile branding is going to be all about. And the fraternity was sitting nice and comfortable. Yes, electrification was coming in. People were talking about hydrogen. People are talking about reducing fossil fuels. That's fine. But still, it was going at its usual pace. And then suddenly, COVID happened. You know, there are decades when nothing happens. And then there are weeks when decades happen. And that's really what happened to us. Everything got accelerated. Behaviors changed. Priorities changed. What the consumer wanted then and tomorrow and the day after changed. And therefore, the paradigms of automobile branding also rapidly took a change. So what you were wanting to actually do and or possibly invest in over the next 24 to 36 to 48 months, you had to do it in the next 12 months. People stopped buying cars. Not because people didn't want to buy cars, because you wanted private mobility, people lost jobs. Salaries went down. You couldn't afford to buy a new car. Therefore, the first thing you did was you didn't want to travel in the metro or on the train or in the bus. You went ahead and bought a used car. Used cars dried up. People couldn't buy cars. The people who actually are at the entry level of, say, the car buying pyramid, they couldn't even afford to buy two-wheelers. That was the harsh reality that we were facing suddenly in the year 2020, 2021. And that has an extremely important implication on what automobile branding would really end up being. Because if an automobile brand is the promise of an experience, automobile branding is actually delivering that experience consistently over time. So the very nature of automobile branding changed. Logos were not asked for. you were not asking about advertising. You were actually asking about, are you delivering your promise consistently to me? And COVID accelerated the inevitable. That actually the designers and the marketers were trying to stay away from. Because any change in the industry is very, very capital intensive. And what we saw rapidly in the next 3 years, or these 3 years, are 7 clear trends that at least I have observed, okay, in the due course of my work and my interactions with my friends in the automotive fraternity. 7 clear trends in the consumer and not the customer behavior. And I consciously use the word consumer because, as I have said, you need not be a customer anymore to consume mobility. You need not buy. Tomorrow and the day after, the generation that today is, say, 15 years of age may actually find better solutions in not buying a piece of transport, but they would definitely be experiencing it. So the seven trends are: number 1, from ownership to usership. Number 2, from single mode of mobility to multiple modes of mobility. So I would not waste my time taking my car and driving from Lower Parel to Kolaba. That is still close. Okay? Driving from, say, Goregaon to Kolaba, because I work in Bombay House. I would be foolish enough to do that. And I am not bound by all those trappings of status anymore. In fact, people would see me as stupid if I were to do it. So I'll possibly take my car, go to the nearest railway, go to the nearest station, park it there, take the train, get off, then possibly from there take a 3-wheeler and go to Bombay House. That is what I will do. And if you can provide me with the solutions to facilitate my multimodal mobility, you are my partner. Third, from expert opinion, I'm getting into engagement. Right? There are the auto cars and the cars and the overdrives of the world. But yes, at some point of time, I know all of them have access to grind and all of them have agendas. Therefore, I am looking forward to how are you as a solution provider engaging with me as an individual. And how do I respond to you accordingly? Therefore, engagement is going to become more important, is becoming more important than just mere expert opinion. Fourth, loyalty is moving to advocacy. I need not buy a Mercedes-Benz in my entire life. But if someone were to ask me that I have a budget of 50 lakhs or 60 lakhs of rupees, if you have that amount of money to spare, I want to buy an automobile, let's go ahead and buy a C-Class. I need not own it, but I can still be an advocate. Because you've given me experiences through your branding strategy, which has made me an advocate. I may have outgrown a Maruti Suzuki, but I can still recommend an Alto or a Wagoner to lots of the young friends who are just entering the corporate world and want to have their own mode of transport. I can still be an advocate. Number 5, reliability is moving to durability. Now, there was a point of time when in the 1960s and 70s, people had a car, they owned the car, they kept it for 20 years. That was because they didn't have choice. Right? Then people moved to reliability. A Japanese car will not break down. But will a Japanese car last you for 10 years? Typically not. Will a Korean car last you for 10 years? Typically not. Will a German car do? Of course, yes. But will it be reliable? No. You'll have to keep that car in the garage. You'll have to be ready for keeping a German car in the garage for 2 months out of 12 in a year. But it will last you for 20 years. But what's happening now is because of electrification coming in, and because of clean mobility and other forms, the very nature of the automobile construction is changing. Therefore, durability is now coming back into the vogue. Also because people, when they invest, they want to keep their investments for longer. Number 6, from playing catch up, it's to personalization. उसकी गाड़ी में वो लगा हुआ है, मेरे गाड़ी में भी वो लगाओ, होता था. मेरे को ऐसा चाहिए. मेरा बच्चा बोलता है मेरे गाड़ी में ये कलर चाहिए, या बीवी बोलती है गाड़ी में इस टाइप का पर्सनलाइजेशन चाहिए. It's moving from catching up into personalization. And lastly, from an element of self-indulgence, it's moving into an object of sustainability. People are getting conscious, they're getting actually aware. So these are the 7 trends, according to me, clear trends about consumer behavior in the world of automobiles. And based on that, at the end of the day, it's all inside. So what does it mean? The world of automobile branding has to realize that all that you need to do to reach out to your target segments are about looking at the consumer from inside rather than from outside. And these are led by three key trends or behaviors. Number 1, there's definitely this cultural confidence that has come into India and into the Indian consumers. Secondly, in the younger generation, there's a level of irreverence. Okay, so you may be a Mercedes-Benz, you may be a Volvo, you may be a Jaguar, but if you're not really relevant to me, if you're not talking my language, doesn't make a difference, right? What you did 20 years back doesn't make any difference to me. Tell me, what are you going to do 20 years hence? And lastly, I'm actually into experimentation. That's why you have automakers actually getting out with solutions like leasing. I need not own the car. I can keep it only for 3 years and give it back, and then take another one. I want to experiment with an investment that I'm making. So from the outside, which is a lot of me too, I actually equate it to a condominium. This is a typical ugly condominium in Gurgaon, where I come from, okay, where everything from the outside looks the same, right? You look at these 2 examples. If I were to take out the badges, you would think they're coming from the same company. But one is a BYD, the other is a Tesla. So somewhere, designers, I'm sorry, you guys go through divine inspirations which are so similar. It's like in the 1980s when all music used to sound similar. So basically people were copying each other, right? Now you guys are again copying each other. All your silhouettes look the same. All the SUVs look boxy. The light patterns are the same. You see the new Mahindra range that they talk about? They all have those fangs. All the Mahindra vehicles have those fangs. The BYD has those fangs. Now Hyundai will design their vehicles in some other way. They would also either be getting inspired by someone, or they would typically be looking at somebody else and saying, okay, let me do the same thing because that's the easiest way. So the outside is me too. It's the inside which is going to make a difference. Just like those condominiums from the outside look the same, but every living room is personalized. Therefore, the same BYD and the same Tesla, even if they look similar from the outside, in the inside, they are very different personalities. And that is what is going to really happen in the world of automobile branding. It's going to be more about the inside than the outside. It's going to be more about your place than their place. Earlier, you had to go to the showroom. You will not go to the showroom. They will come to you. Firstly, you will be using digital aids and tools to decide what you really want to buy. And once you decide, all you need to do is, you have only 2 physical interfaces. Number 1, test drive. Number 2, signing of papers. And both of them will actually happen at your place, not at their place. And the third one is, right now there's this huge fascination for screens, because screens look high-tech, but there is a move when you'll realize that the screens, the tactile screens are possibly not the best for driving. Therefore, there is this move of actually getting into a combination of a hybrid, screens and buttons, screens and voice. Okay, because you're driving, there's something stupid called a heads-up display, which I don't know why people make in the first place, right? Because it's so bloody distracting. Okay, then you want to suddenly change the AC and you're looking down and you're gone, over. You will not need to do that. Already there's this move in Europe of regulations coming in saying some emergency and critical applications on buttons. So it's all about the inside more than the outside. And as I said, experiences are going to be about the test, sharing mobility, hiring mobility, owning it, advocating it, getting to know as to who you as an automobile brand partner with. Okay? Reading about you, watching you, sharing opinion, and also giving opinion about you, okay? And hearing about you. So it's not about the logo anymore. It's not about how you look. It's not about the exterior styling. Somebody's doing it, that's perfectly fine. But experiences are going to be much, much beyond that. And as I said, I need not own to experience. And at the same time, the obverse is also true. I need not experience even if I own. So I can have an automobile, but if you are not talking to me, I'll not experience you. And I will shun you, I will switch my brands as quickly as possible. Therefore, the automobile company needs to decide, the automobile brand needs to decide as to what it really is. Is it the maker of an automobile? Is it about mobility? Or is it about technology? The new companies in the world today, in the world of mobility, are about technology. There's a company called NIO. NIO is about technology. There's another company called Expereal. It's about technology. They do not project themselves as automobile companies. They say we are tech companies who also happen to make cars. Because they're making phones at the same time. Sony is getting into cars. What? Is Sony an automobile company? No. Sony is a technology company. Mobility happens to be yet another expression and manifestation of technology. Therefore, you as a brand need to decide which space do you want to be. Maruti is making cars, it has 42% of the Indian market share, but tomorrow Maruti may actually end up being a vendor to mobility solutions providers. It may still have 42% market share of the cars sold, but you will not be buying a Maruti. You will be using a blue Smart, or you will be using a green Smart, or you will be using an orange Smart or something. Irrespective or oblivious of the fact as to which brand of vehicle you're actually driving. Because you're using a service, you're using a solution. And this is extremely important for all of us in the room, because this is the question we need to ask our client. So what business are you actually in? In making the product, providing the solution, or are you in the larger space of technology? Therefore, the next, according to me, Vijay Bahu anyway talked about the reptilian brain, and yes, it is about the reptilian brain. We as human beings, we are always looking at ways and methods to survive. Okay? Survival for us, collectively or as an individual, is extremely important. And therefore, the next for someone in the business of automobile branding is about candor and transparency. It's about aligning with a greater purpose. This is going to become extremely important for all brands, not just automobiles. It's less about the physical, it's the inside over the outside. It is definitely much more collaborative and co-creative, hyper-personal, and I do not believe in this talk about there's an India and there is a Bharat. There isn't. We are one large market. People in the rural areas learn from the metros, people in the metros learn from the rural. Let it be collaborative and co-creative. Let us not try to actually wedge. There are enough divisions in our country already. Let's not create one more of this India versus Bharat. We are like one large country, whatever you wish to call it. Call it Jambu Dvipa, I'm extremely happy with it, but it's one large market. And I finally end what I have to share today with this wonderful example of the next. Another friend of mine, Georges Remy, way back in 1951, drew something called Explorers to the Moon. Man actually landed on the moon in 1969. He drew something, he imagined something 18 years before it actually happened. That is what really the next is all about. When you have the power to imagine things which actually happen almost in the near context and not really in the very much future. So I'm sorry to my friend Albert Robida, but his neighbor, a Belgian, Georges Remy, whom we know as Urge, to me was a far better futurist in the lines of, say, an H.G. Wells or an Arthur C. Clarke or even a Jules Verne, in actually foreseeing things and predicting things much better than the others. Thank you very much for your patience.